Welcome to the preview show for the 2024 Maturity Classic Final. Here last week, same time, same place, looking at the heats. And Smithy, it was a wet night out there at the Meadows, but nonetheless, still a really good card of racing.
Certainly was. I had to go get the feathers trimmed because it was just a little bit too wet, a little bit too long, and the hair was getting in my eyes. So I wasn't too happy with that patch.
Yeah, even colder now, you got the ears exposed.
Might have to go with the Meadows beanie. They're a nice sort, the Meadows beanie. So hopefully a few of our listeners are buying those. But
A lot of people chasing them for nothing.
Yeah, for nothing. Everyone wants a freebie,
clearly.
don't they? And I'm not that nice of a bloke, as we know, Patch.
Yeah.
So back to the racing, and yeah, it was quite wet, but it was a good night of racing, and it probably favoured the dogs that were a little bit stronger as we saw getting through the race. And I'm sure once we cut apart the maturity, we'll find that there's not a huge amount of early speed in it. So that's just the way that the heats panned out.
Yep, that they did. And we all know going into the series, what mattered most was the maturity heats. However, what happened off the back of that and after race 2 was absolutely amazing. The run of Palawa King, and I was out having a feed. I was at a mate's 30th on the back of a 60th. So it was a pretty handy night for me, but I forgot about the race. And I got a message from a mate saying, how big was that? I thought, oh, shit, I forgot about it.
Yeah.
And then went back to watch and thought, wow, that was amazing. And Twitter blew up, which is hard to do, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. I've been explaining to a few people the reach that it's had on our Facebook page, on our Twitter page. Our social media has just been absolutely nuts. And we're not the only ones posting it either. Everyone has been just absolutely invested in the run. Everyone's been watching it. How good was Dan Hibbert's call as well? The holy cow. I'll remember that for the rest of my life, I reckon. But I reckon it summed it up perfectly. He told the story throughout the run. He said he'd flopped out. He said he'd tacked back on. He said he still had a lot of work to do, but he managed to get over the top.
And also said he might have left it too late.
He might have. And that's just Palawa King, though. You wrote a piece during the week about what a star he is, what he's doing for the sport. And while it's not necessarily breaking track records over these sort of distances, he wins Group 1s for fun and he does what he has to do.
Yeah, it's those run-on types. And when they get a profile like that, like Sportsbet lost on the race. And if it wasn't a profile like him, they wouldn't have, because people just get behind him and one like him. And we love the backmarkers, don't we, Smithy?
We do.
Over time, particularly sprinters, well, particularly stays, I should say, and even sprinters, where it's harder to do at the top level. So in true style of what you do very well on SEN track, you've got a top 10 list, which you go through most weeks. And this is the pinnacle of radio, ladies and gentlemen. What are some of the topics you've come up with in the past?
Sometimes I get a little bit bored and I have to go here, there and everywhere.
Bored, or just what you want to do?
Well, it's probably a short attention span is probably the reasoning behind it. But we do a little bit of everything on SEN from time to time. And there might be top 10 hangover foods, top 10 fruits, top 10 simple pleasures. It changes week in, week out. And we do a few different things. So I enjoy putting the list together. So when you said that we're going to put a list together on this week's pod, my ears perked up.
Indeed. So it's a top 5 backmarkers. Inspiration from Gareth Hall, who's obviously a part of the SEN track team as well. And what's another slang term you could use for this, Smithy? You mentioned one just before we went on air. So top 5 backmarkers is what we're going to call it. But
what did I call them? Run-on types?
No, some videos you can watch after midnight.
Oh, some videos.
After a few cans.
Yes.
Wind back the clock.
Well, you and I can throw you under the bus here as well, because we have done this together. But after a few sherbets, sometimes you're just sitting there at the TV, all the live footy, the live cricket, whatever, it's all done. And you're still happy to have a couple of cans and you go, what are we going to do? So you chuck the YouTube on and sometimes you just hit some weird areas and you start watching, I don't know, Billy Cart racing going down the hill, cheese wheels, Selena Gomez music videos.
Adam Gilchrist fastest 100.
Exactly right. You hit some weird areas.
The Undertaker returns.
Exactly right. But sometimes you just pop on a few of these greyhounds and you don't put up a Fernando Bale. I know he's an absolute superstar and what he did just kind of warms our hearts. You put on these backmarkers, these dogs that get a long way back and think that it's just impossible for them to win.
So how are we going to do this? We haven't seen each other's top 5. So this could be awesome. It could be pathetic. Did you want to go top 5 or reveal each? So sorry, 5th. Then we'll both do 5th, both do 4th, both do 3rd.
What do you? I'm happy with either.
All right, let's do that.
I reckon we do that.
All right, so 5th in line. I'll go first. You heard of a greyhound called Rocky Bale?
The name rings a bell, but not. I can't imagine he is an absolute superstar.
He wasn't a household name, but we're going back to circa sort of 2014, and I was to start to sort of plant the seeds from a passion point of view in greyhound racing. Sweet It Is was going around at that point in time, and this boy Rocky Bale often gave her a bit of curry. So if you go back and watch some of his replays, somewhere over 600, 700, he was a powerhouse blue dog, and he's worth watching. So Rocky Bale for me in 5th. How about you?
I'll go with one who's probably a bit more of a household name. I'll go with Burn One Down. So he came not long after Rocky Bale, and the sweet it is, but the way he'd just get back and he'd barrel his way through when he had to. He's probably
a big boy, wasn't he?
He was a big boy, and he was one of my absolute favourites of all time, Burn One Down. He was always a short quote, so you never really wanted to take him, but you always had to tune in and watch.
Yeah, he was special. No doubt about that. All right, 4th for me. You mentioned, we spoke about a couple of greyhounds last week on the show, and the label you put to them respectively was iffy. This boy carries that in some way, but he was very good in his prime. His name's Rip and Sam.
Oh, yes.
So he was a little brother to Tornado Tears. I reckon he was faster than Tornado Tears. So I reckon people behind him would certainly agree with that. And there's some stories about him, whether he trialled at Geelong, they let him go to hand sleep, and he'd just stop and turn around and go, what am I meant to do here? Get him into a field. He was an absolute beast and set some of the fastest times you've seen at Sandown. Ran on from nowhere too. None bigger than that Nationals final in 2018, if you remember that one.
I'm a little bit disgusted with myself that I haven't got him on my list. I don't know how.
Escape
I didn't
the mind.
remember. Shane Williams is not going to be happy with me
No,
leaving
he
him
still
off.
lives on Shane Williams' couch, and I
He
see
does.
Shane most days feeding him maxi bonds and whatever else he wants to give him.
He's built like me these days, Rip and Sam, but he was an absolute star, and I'm disappointed that I missed out. But a greyhound that I didn't miss out on, Patch, Cindy's Magic, and she was an absolute star. I don't think she ever knocked off a Group 1, but she featured in plenty of them. She got back. There wasn't much of her. So at the other end of the scale to Burn One Down, but she was just full of heart, and she would just rattle home.
Importantly, most of it was over 500, wasn't it? Which is tough to do, although she did step up in the end.
Yeah, she did a lot of her racing over 500. I think through the middle part of her career, she spent a bit of time over the distance, but then she came back to 500-metre racing towards the end. 152 starts she had, won over 400,000 in prize money, and none of it was from the front.
Amazing. All right, let's get on with it. 3rd on the list for me, he won a Perth Cup. His name's Mybro Fabio. So he was a beast. And when we say what Cindy's Magic did over the 500, he was the same, but he did it in good fields. And that Perth Cup win, I've never seen anything like it. He was a beast of a sprinter.
An absolute superstar he was. He was just unbelievable. And then he's gone on as a stud dog and thrown some decent dogs by the name of, she's fast.
Yeah, who was quite handy in her own right.
Yeah.
3rd for you.
Sweet It Is comes in for me. So she got a little bit of a mention with Rocky Bale and might be a little bit stiff to only be in at number 3, to be honest. Sweet It Is. She was an absolute star. Won nearly $1 million in prize money going back about 10 years ago, which was unheard of. There was no $1 million races back then for her to pad her stats at all.
Yeah, all right. 2nd for me, Palawa King. And I think it's easy in any sport or racing code to have that recency bias, but I think as time goes on, he will be regarded as not only one of the better run-on greyhounds, but I think one of the best we've seen from a staying point of view.
Well, we must have been on the same wavelength here, because I've gone with Palawa King as number 2 as well, and probably a greyhound that, like you said, recency bias might be kicking in, but he's so talented, and he just doesn't give a stuff in the first 100 metres of the races at the moment. He's just unbelievable.
Good way to
watch.
put it. Doesn't give a rat's, does he?
He doesn't. He goes, I don't care. I'll still run 29 5s at Wentworth Park if you put me in over the 500. But I'm going to have to tack onto the back of him at some point.
Yeah, and you will be over 500 soon in veterans races, so that will be absolute red carpet racing. Number 1, and she's already been mentioned, Sweet It Is. She was a star, back-to-back Sandown Cups, and what I love most, I guess, about the entertainment of racing, Smithy, and what Sweet It Is was able to do, the handicaps at the Meadows. Race 1, most
bring it
Saturday
back,
nights.
Patch.
Unbelievable. When she ran around, usually would be $1.40 or something. She's off a few metres, she's $2. That was just sensational to watch.
She was unbelievable. Sweet It Is, obviously, but my number 1, and not necessarily because I was watching her week in, week out or anything like that, but she's the YouTube phenom herself, and that's Swift Fantasy. So I know you wanted to give her an honourable mention, but I just can't have a list of this without seeing some of those YouTube clips. I don't recall ever seeing her live, but the amount of times that I've watched her videos, her races, her replays, Swift Fantasy has to be number 1 for me.
Yeah, I've got mates who would barely know who Wow She's Fast is or Palawa King. They know Swift Fantasy because she does the rounds, doesn't she, on social media. We speak about Palawa King and what he did last week. She's been doing that for years.
Yes, exactly right. And she transcended the sport. So some of our best greyhounds
Do you remember
have
that
been able
period
to do
of
it.
time?
I do.
Like she had a massive impact in Australia from a news point of view when she was racing then, not sort of
Yeah, it was
on
probably
YouTube
in a period where I
since then.
was probably busy chasing girls from year 9 to year 12 or something like that.
You were a good looking sort back then.
I was much better looking than I am now. I definitely peaked in year 10 patch. But yeah, it was probably that period where I wasn't that invested in greyhound racing, but you always knew the name Swift Fantasy. And she's the greyhound, as you touched on, that your mates that know nothing about greyhound racing, if they say, oh, what's your favourite greyhound of all time? Swift Fantasy will inevitably get a mention.
And there'll be people out there thinking you two are absolute muppets. Where is Bold Choice? But we did make the asterisk before we put together this list that greyhounds we must have seen.
Yes. Well, obviously came a little bit before our time patch, Bold Trace. I think you're a 94 baby. I'm younger than you, which will baffle a few, in 95. So he was around the mid 80s. And there was another one from the mid 80s that's been doing the rounds that I've seen on social media since Palawa King's replay by the name of Skurlow Champ. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly.
Never heard of it.
Over in England, when I started doing a little bit of research on this list, I thought I'd better give this an honourable mention. I think the greyhound girl, Dimity Ma, has put up a couple of replays as well on her page. So go and have a look at those because he definitely fits on this list. But unfortunately, come before our time as well.
Over what sort of trip?
He broke 20 track records between 680 metres and 888.
The marathon.
The marathon.
Talking about bringing things back, that would be something to behold. So there's a top 5 back markers from greyhounds that we've seen.
Lengths away, sweet it is, here she comes on the outside with a devastating run, cutting back to the inside, now to the outer again, in the straight eight of Mary the leader, sweet it is down the outside, is coming with a howler, they hit the line, yes, sweet it is has got up to win it.
In a mirror, she's still 6 lengths away, they hear down the back, and Awesome Bender's charged to the lead, from the inside, Opawa Paddy, looking to run now, comes Melandry with a big burst, here's Swift Fantasy, hooking to the outside a bit late, Awesome Bender in front, Swift Fantasy, go baby, Swift Fantasy. He's beaten Awesome Bear.
As we discussed, ripping card at the Meadows coming up this Saturday night, particularly through those quaddie legs. We've spoken about the fireball, the maturity. The first one we're going to hone into is the fireball, and Palawa King's been wax lyrical all week about what he's able to do, Smithy. But what about the rest of them that he's up against? Who impressed you out of last week's heats?
Well, I think if you had have gone through the heats last week and said, these are the dogs that'll finish top 4, these are the dogs that'll make their way through to the final, if you could hand pick them, I reckon we would have come up with a very similar field to what we've come up with here.
And that was the advantage of the 2 heats, wasn't it? We were set for a good final no matter what.
Exactly right. And plenty of dogs that were stepping up to the 700 for the first time and had that early speed. And there's plenty of dogs that are a bit more seasoned, a bit more of the dour sort of style stayers that were in the series as well. So plenty of intrigue, and they probably got the best of the weather conditions on Saturday night as well. So when you think about Make No Promise, when you think about Stomping, Aunt Virginia, they're dogs that stepped up for the first time. Drill Sergeant's one that obviously is won Group 1s, and he's got the early speed as well. So there's plenty of early speed in this race. There's plenty of strength with Palawa King, Allah's Babe, Exploded as well, who got back in the field last week and then managed to rattle home. And I think he thought he had the race won.
Well, most people would have when one like him at the front.
Exactly right. And Palawa King, we know what he did. We've spoken about that plenty, but yeah, it's an intriguing race, this one, Patch.
It's going to be a ripper. So how does it play out? I mean, this could be one of the all-time great finishes because we've got those that you mentioned who stepped up for the first time last week. Yet again, they're going to show speed and be on the front foot. Drill Sergeant, we know, always does. Stomping really didn't finish off the race that well. How he performs second up, we'll wait and see. But Palawa King's going to start favourite. How do you think this field looks in front of him, and will he have it as easy as what he did last week?
Well, the way the map pans out, it's intriguing. It's got 1, 2, 3, 7 and 8 are all speed dogs that are probably going to be in the first half of the field to win. I do subscribe to the second up syndrome over 700 metres where their second crack is sometimes somewhat flattened, and given the weather conditions, it probably was a tougher 730 metres than it normally is. So I'm sure the trainers have just kept them on the collar and lead during the week, and they're going to be nice and, well, fresh as they can keep them going into this. So hopefully they can ping to the front. But when dogs like Allah's Babe and Palawa King, if they can find their way to the rail and pick their way through the field, we know Palawa King's got a jockey on board. Allah's Babe probably still has a bit to learn, but they're going to be really strong coming through the middle of the race.
Do you think she's a sleeping giant of this race, Allah's Babe? Because we speak about the speed and the lack of strength for a lot of these greyhounds. Palawa King, we know what he's going to do. Is Allah's Babe a sleeping giant? Is Palawa King taking her thunder in terms of going into it?
I think so a little bit, and I think the map works out really nicely for her. 1, 2, 3 are all speed dogs. Palawa King comes out 5 lengths last. So Alice Babe might be able to just tuck in behind the speed, and there might be a little bit of carnage on the first bend as well. So she might be able to just get that perfect slot into the race and just kind of weave her way through the field and pick them off one by one. So I do think she's maybe a sleeping giant. A few people might not be considering her as one of the main chances, but she's well enough in the market. I think she's second favourite, and I reckon she's going to be awfully hard to beat.
The narrative to this race in running is going to be absolutely superb, and what it sets up as they get past the 600 metre boxes for the second time. Who do you think is going to win it?
Palawa King's impossible to go past after that run, because you just see he can win from any situation. He's such a freak of a dog, and I've got to have him on top, but then I can't split Alice Babe and Exploded after that. Exploded, I almost want Stomping to go in front of him and him follow Stomping into the race and hopefully not get caught wide at that first bend. Alice Babe I've already touched on. So Palawa King has to be on my on-top selection, but if I'm having a punt, it's probably going to be Alice Babe with maybe a small play on Exploded as well.
Yeah, Palawa King for me. And last week I was sort of going with him because of my heart. Exploded was in there. We know the times that he's been able to set at Albion Park, but in the end, the King was absolutely awesome. So yeah, I'm not taking him on in this race. I think we might see some really good improvement from Aunt Virginia as well. But the King for both Smithy and I. When I mentioned as well, this quaddie is quite good. And these two feature races will be interrupted. Interrupted is a really rude word to put it, because this is an epic contest, the free-for-all. Race 7. How's some of the names that line up here, and the quality of it's sort of the standard of a group race itself?
Well, I think you've got, just having a quick look here, I probably should have done the maths, but 4 Group 1 winners: Cruising Debbie, Transponder, Mapunga Shine, Stormy Day. And then you've got In the Hub, who's absolutely flying. You've got Magic Muffin, who might be multiple Group 1 placed as well, and Zipping Moffat and Hi There Frank to just polish off the race nicely. Unbelievable race. A lot of these dogs have just been absolute superstars of our sport, and it's so good to see them all on a big night. They might not have been eligible for an age-restricted race like the Maturity. They probably can't run the 700 metres, but to see them on a big night like Maturity night, all together and all having a crack at each other, I think is a great thing for our sport.
Ripping race, and the main chances do look to be drawn down towards the rail. In the Hub's flying, as we know, but we know it's rocks or diamonds for him. He's going to run last, or at least midfield or worst, or he's going to win easily. The way it looks and who's drawn around him, what do you think he's going to do?
I think you want to get, if you can get around $2.50 for In the Hub in this race, with Transponder drawn directly to his outside, we know he can push up the track a little bit. I think you're probably taking In the Hub, but you want at least better than $2, because it's almost a flip of the coin with the way that he goes about his business. He said it's rocks or diamonds. He's an absolute flying machine. There's not many dogs in Australia that are going quicker than him at the moment, but he needs a little bit of not luck, but he needs to be on his best behaviour.
He needs that room to get moving. Does Cruising Debbie from the Red pose any threat to him?
I think
not that she's as quick as him at all, but more so how his race looks early for him to apply himself.
I think she can lead him. I think she
Is that a problem for him?
And I reckon that may be a problem for him, but she's not going to come off on him. She's not going to kind of pressure him too much. She's just going to be there. So it poses an interesting question, and there's obviously speed that might come across from out wide as well. Stormy Day occasionally jumps. We know that. Magic Muffin is
Who knows how she'll begin? Who knows?
She used to break 5 seconds for fun, and now she's obviously gotten a bit stronger and a little bit slower out. Mapunga Shine's now second up, so there's plenty of question marks in this.
Who wins it?
I'm going to go with an each way play, and I'm going to go Cruising Debbie. I think she might be able to lead all the way.
Yeah, I think even if she goes forward, she's going to be under the pump. Transponder's going to be pushing early in the Hub so fast, as we know. I went with Mapunga Shine. You could make a case for many of these. I just thought he was good last week. And for one like him, who has been inconsistent at times and probably hasn't been at his best, I think being fresh after last week, first up in the Maturity, is a good thing for him. So Cruising Debbie for Smithy, Mapunga Shine for me in the free-for-all. He's an absolute cracker and the perfect entree into what's going to be a really intriguing contest in the Group 1 Maturity Classic final. It's time to hone in to that. And what we saw last week, Smithy, we didn't see some of these bigger names get through. So I think it's fair to say it's not a vintage edition of the Maturity Classic, but still you look at it on paper and think, this is an intriguing race and really difficult to tear apart.
Yeah, well, we spoke last week about the strength of the honour roll of the Maturity, and it's hard to live up to that year in, year out. And it is fair to say that this isn't the strongest edition of the Maturity. It probably wasn't the strongest edition of the Maturity going into the heats either. But when a few of the big names get knocked out, it probably thins it out a little bit. But what we do have is one of the more intriguing Maturities that we've had in recent memory, because it's a lot of strength dogs. There's not a huge amount of early speed in it. There's dogs that are going to want to get back, or maybe just even mid-pack and then rattle home. So if one of them ends up finding the lead in the early stages, are they going to be able to burn the candle at both ends? That's the question.
You were there on track Saturday night, and clearly the weather was atrocious.
Yeah.
What sort of, I guess, lens do you have on it, looking through these dogs and what they did last week? Do you give more positivity to those who went around later in the night? Were conditions worse by then?
It's hard to say because the rain was kind of coming in and out. So the track was pretty consistent throughout the night of what they were facing. But at the same time, different races were raining at different points. So there was more surface water there. So I think what you can do is probably put a line through the times a little bit. They're not running the times that they'd normally be able to run. There was only a couple of them that broke 30 seconds.
That, basically come up with a time that you think they normally run as opposed to what they did last week.
Yeah, so look at their peak. Look at what you think their PB could be, and look at the splits that you think that they could run throughout the race, because I don't know what the weather's going to be like on Saturday night, but if it's the same way, they're all, at the end of the day, they're all running on the same track. So they're all facing the same conditions. So it's hard to try and work into it. It's not like thoroughbreds where you go, this thing's a wet weather specialist. You can't really roll with that sort of gear. So they're all running on it. It's an intriguing race. I think whoever leads is going to be really tough to beat. But then at the same time, some of these dogs, they just rattle home, and they're the back markers like we were speaking about earlier.
For sure. Ones like Tully Luna, who was massive last week. So if it's so important to lead, how do you think this map looks? Because there's a few here. There's some that are quite hit or miss. So how do you think it's going to look when they greet the judge for the first time?
Certainly not the easiest map to work out, that's for sure. I think if House of Turbo gets a run, he'll lead any of these, and I think he'll be winning. So that's my big statement of the week. Patch is House of Turbo, if he gets a run, will be winning. But otherwise, if he doesn't, I think the speed comes in 1, 3 and maybe 6 as well, with Vincent Bale, Zipping Grillis and Follow the Band. So if Follow the Band can capitalise, I think it had the fastest splits between the 20 and the 100 metres on Saturday night. So if Follow the Band capitalises, punches up, holds the inside, then a couple of these dogs might not be able to get their own way, and it might be a bit more difficult for them to win. But Zipping Grillis is a dog that can probably come from off the speed a little bit, can lead as well.
He's a massive chance to lead.
I think he's a massive chance to lead as well. And Vincent Bale has just been going from strength to strength for Team Grenfell, and might give them their first maturity as well. So you can make a case for nearly all of these runners, I think. I love Ethanol Water. I think she's an absolute superstar.
Powerhouse, isn't she? She's got a lot of muscle.
She is. I love the whole Ethanol litter, to be honest.
They're awesome. So
they're great to watch. Great to watch. They're obviously phenomenally trained by Team Daly, and she's a greyhound that she's not going to be leading. If she's leading, I'll be shocked. But she's going to put herself into the race. She's going to give herself an opportunity, and she has that race sense. She has that experience. I think this will be her 40th career start on Saturday night. She's the greyhound that I want to be with, because there's so many question marks on the other greyhounds of whether they can lead, whether they can't lead. We know what she's going to do. She'll get back and she'll run on, and she was the fastest run home time last week, and I think she'll do it again.
She's going to be sitting there and certainly been a threat at all stages of the race. And I sat on the fence. I had splinters coming out of you-know-what all week, Smithy. As soon as the week started, or Sunday morning when we had to get tips through for the GCA, I thought, yeah, Follow the Band's drawn well. I've been a fan of his for some time. And what you say about that 20-metre mark to 100's not only important in any race, but from his draw. Like, are we looking too far into it to try and take him on?
I think so. I mean, he's won 3 in a row. He went 29.82 3 starts ago. Are they going to be able to beat him if he runs 29.82 after a 5.05 first split?
Well, I think it is the case that we're looking too far into it to take him on.
Yeah.
That's obviously not answered until we look at this race in hindsight. So I went with him initially, and I changed my mind. I thought with you, Ethanol Water, I think in the map that looks to be what it is, she's going to be threatening at an early part of the race. But then I just settled on Vincent Bale. I've loved what he's been able to do consistently recently. He holds his line, and he's one who's not going to fly the start like a Zipping Grillis is probably able to do. Yeah. But when you speak about Follow the Band and he's 20 to 100, I think Vincent Bale, he's probably 50 to 150.
Yeah.
He's so powerful.
Yeah.
And there's been times where he's had a bit of a nudge and he's stood up tall to that and taken it on, which is such a sign of class in my opinion. So Vinny Bale for me.
shades of his old man, I reckon. Vincent Bale.
Who's the old
Christo
boy?
Bale is the old
Yeah.
boy. So will be a fair feather in the cap for Christo Bale's stud career if he can land a Group 1 this early on. As I said, I'm with Ethanol Water. I think Zipping Grillis is a major danger. Follow the band as well. Vincent Bale's probably my 4th selection, and if House of Turbo gets a run, I'm chips in. So I could make a case for a lot of these, Patch. I'm getting the splinters as well. I think I've got your disease in that respect, but Ethanol Water is the one I'm going to be with at this stage.
All right, Ethanol Water for Smithy and Vincent Bale, or Vinny Bales, I like to call him, for me. So there's a look at the 3 best races on Saturday night, being the Fireball, the Free-for-all race 7, which is an absolute beauty, and then the Group 1 Maturity Classic, which is the last leg of the quaddie. Smithy, for anyone in the region of Broadmeadows and want to get along to the track on Saturday night, what's on offer for them?
So we still do have some dining tickets available, Patch. We'll shut them off at some point so we can get the hospitality team nice and sorted, but they are still available. So $79
Shut them off to the
ticket.
leftovers after the last.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
We need a few of the nice feeds that they put together. The team
Doesn't matter if there's any warmth about them, as I've learned
nah.
from your past experiences.
You can eat them at any stage, and they're still wonderful. We'll also have a food truck on course. We'll have plenty of heaters about as well, which is nice and important, Patch. So hopefully everyone can stay warm and be nice and rugged up and enjoy some fast greyhounds being fast. I know you and I absolutely love that.
Nothing better. Hopefully Mother Nature looks after us going into Saturday night. From a coverage point of view, you can watch it on the Watchdog app, and also Sky Racing Active. Myself, Nathan Rooney, who's an absolute guru, and also Kat Ernst to be out on track speaking to all the participants and getting the latest. So ripping night, looking forward to it, can't wait. Enjoy it, and most of all, stay safe and best of luck on the punt.